Hello, welcome back to I Create For You. We're going to do another story in the Spooky Yellowstone book, and it's called Fatal Feud. And it's saying Big Sky, so that's like the area in which this ghost story originated. He was a surly old prospector who came to Cook City in 1897 looking for gold. He'd had his fill of working on ranches and wanted to strike it rich. Armed with a pickaxe and a shovel, he wandered the steep mountains and valleys, examining every stream and river for glints of gold. He slept each night under the stars except when it rained. Then he curled up under a pine. When he found a promising spot, he threw up a shack for himself near a stream and set some traps, intending to supplement his prospecting by selling furs. He spent the days panning, and in the evenings he checked traps and cooked supper on an open fire. After eating his victuals, he'd sit on a fallen log, watch the sunset over the mountain peaks, while his dog Shep hunted chipmunks in the sagebrush. A hermit by nature, he kept his interactions with fellow humans brief and to the point. He had no time for nonsense, especially not from the female half of the species. Still, he couldn't help running into folks when he went into the settlement for supplies, and that's how he met Mrs. Miller, the most aggravating female in the whole darn West. The old man wasn't a particularly good prospector. After a decade of solitude and scraping by on what he could trade for gold dust and furs, the prospector threw in the towel. Time to try something else. Unfortunately, the only job to hand was working on the Miller Ranch for that horrible she-cat, now a widow of several years. Being a cowboy and general ranch hand didn't suit him after spending so much time as a prospector, and Mrs. Miller drove him plumb crazy with her nagging about every little thing. So the old prospector squirreled away every penny for 5 long years until he had enough money to file a claim on some land just northeast of the Miller place. After saying farewell to the troublesome Mrs. Miller, the old prospector settled down with Shep and a couple of cats. The old prospector was thrilled to his boots at the freedom of owning his own spread. He put in a big garden and ran a few head of cattle. He had enough money left over from the purchase to invest in a barn and a few horses. He even started prospecting again, hoping to find some gold or sapphires on his land. His luck had turned at last. Then Mrs. Miller started calling on him at his new spread, unannounced, unwelcome, and quarrelsome as ever. One day she turned out his horses and berated him for leaving his job. Another day she struck his team with a whip, causing them to bolt with his wagon. She once pulled a gun on him when he was down in the root cellar. When he refused to hitch up her team, Mrs. Miller threatened to poison him. She let her cows graze on his pasture land, and when he went to her ranch to discuss the matter, he found the widow entertaining some chap she'd met in town. The chap looked in a hurry while the old prospector traded insults with the disheveled woman. The old prospector asked the sheriff to mediate between them, hoping that would solve the fierce feuding, but it had the opposite effect. Inflamed with rage, Mrs. Miller snuck onto his property while he was in town, stole 30 cabbages, and poisoned his provisions. The old prospector took one bite of the tainted food and realized that something wasn't right. He gave the meal to his cat, and it died a few hours later. The old prospector reported the harassment to the local police, who took samples of the poisoned food and looked at the woman's footprints around his cabin, but nothing was done to curb the quarrelsome Mrs. Miller. Just after the first snowfall, Mrs. Miller paid a man to shoot the old prospector. He took a bullet in the chest and spent many days recovering in the hospital in Butte. While he was in the hospital, his cabin was looted. Mrs. Miller continued to harass the old prospector through the long winter and the spring that followed. On a warm day in June, the old prospector returned home to find his front door open and the water bucket full of poison. It was the last straw. Grabbing his rifle, he went to confront Mrs. Miller with her crimes. After searching all the obvious places, he swung around for a second look through his fields. From the top of the ridge, he saw Mrs. Miller picking her way daintily along a shortcut that ran through his alfalfa bed. When the old prospector shouted, "Stop!" the irksome Mrs. Miller drew her revolver. It was the same weapon that the hired killer had used to shoot him in the chest. Panicked, the old prospector raised his rifle and shot his would-be assassin. Mrs. Miller let out a faint cry and collapsed face down in the alfalfa. Dazed, the old prospector stared at her dead body for what seemed hours. The fear took over. What if someone saw him here with the corpse of the widow? He went back to his cabin and sat for hours trying to decide what to do. The woman had stolen from him, poisoned him, shot him, but he hadn't meant to kill her. Should he turn himself in? He thought of all the times he'd gone to the sheriff and the sheriff hadn't done anything to help him. If they wouldn't help when Mrs. Miller poisoned him and had him shot, would they take pity on him now? Not likely. After dark, the old prospector returned to the alfalfa field. In the darkness, he knelt by the body and moaned, "Oh, girl, if you'd left me alone, this would never have happened." Picking up the stiffened body, he lugged it into the hills. He spent the rest of the night digging a grave using tools fetched from his cabin. It was dawn when he collapsed on his bed, too exhausted to move for the rest of the day. Around 11 o'clock that night, the old prospector was jerked out of his uneasy doze by rapping and wailing sounds from the roof. The stovepipe rattled as the sounds grew louder. The old prospector clapped his hands over his ears as the wailing rose higher and higher. Then he heard Mrs. Miller's sobbing voice. "Help! Help!" she screamed, and then gasped. It was the noise she'd made when his bullet hit her. The small gasp chilled the old prospector worse than the wailing. "Mrs. Miller! I'm sorry," he cried, rearing up in his bed with tears streaming down his face. The sound changed to a low groan. Mrs. Miller's voice rang out again. "Sheriff, arrest him. He did it." The groaning began again, deeper this time, with high overtones that raised every hair on the old prospector's body. He raced outside the cabin. "What do you want?" he shouted at the empty roof. But he knew. Oh yes, he knew. The nights that followed were an agony for the old prospector. During the day he could forget his crime, mostly. He put 2 stumps over the fresh grave to camouflage it. Then he went about his daily chores as if nothing had happened. But at night, sometimes he'd sleep for several hours before the rapping and moaning began. Sometimes he would start as soon as he lay down. Some nights he would hear Mrs. Miller's voice accusing him of various crimes, just as she'd done in life. Some nights she would scream for the sheriff. The old prospector decided to sell his claim before he went insane, but the spirit of Mrs. Miller sensed his decision and began haunting him during the day. She rapped on fence posts and moaned on the wind. Her voice berated him in the barn, out in the fields, and up by the dam. The day he glimpsed her face in the window of the local mercantile, he knew Mrs. Miller's accusing spirit would follow him wherever he went. He'd have to turn himself in or go mad, and he took his story to the sheriff and led a posse to the hidden body. As the old prospector had feared, the jury refused to believe his plea of self-defense, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. When the prison doors closed on him for the last time, he thought he heard the ghost of Mrs. Miller laugh. Whew, yeah, that would drive me insane too, knowing I couldn't get away from that. Didn't seem like too many people missed her, though, because it wasn't mentioned that she was missing when she was shot and killed. Let's see, what could I draw? He just mainly hurt her, but I just want to draw something that maybe depicts her a little bit. There's a drawing. I have 2 pictures I want to go by, but I think I'm going to go with one. Hopefully I can make it look half decent. I'm just going to draw the face of one and the hair of the other and be done with that, because that's how I'm going to roll. I can get this to look like the picture a little bit. This is her hairdo, by the way, in case you can't figure out what I'm drawing here. Let's see here. Going around this way with the hair. They didn't really mention how old she was, or if she had long or short hair. I guess it wasn't really that big of a deal mentioning what she looked like. Not quite sure. So I'm just going to give her a funky hairdo. Like have it pulled back at least up on the top of her head. And then we'll go with the face. Okay. Little wisps of hair. Ear under here. Another ear over here. I'm going to make this a little bit straighter here. Okay. And then her neck. Yeah, I don't know if it even said what century it was or anything, but if he was a prospector, I don't know. I think they'd be wearing those really long gowns with the petticoats and stuff. Not quite sure. But I'm going to give her that kind of a... She's really got a long neck, doesn't she? Wisps of hair coming out top, because she can't look that good as a ghost, huh? Now I'll try to do some spooky face effects here. Didn't even plan to say, didn't even have a, like, if she was pretty or rough or anything. So I'm just going with what her ghost might look like. And she seemed to be moaning a lot, so. So I'm going to make her with her mouth open. Okay, I get this out, make her look a little spookier. a spooky one, isn't she? Definitely. Wouldn't want that hovering over me everywhere I went. Or wake up and see that. A little definition to the eyes. And that, my friends, is scary Mrs. Miller, the ghost of the woman that's gonna haunt him until he meets up with her in the afterlife. Man, if it was that bad in the here and now, imagine what it's gonna be like when those two meet up wherever their life takes them. Well, that's another story in the book, and we shall keep going and finding out more spooky tales. Thanks for showing up and sitting through my story and my sketch. If you like what you see, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't. I'm so close to 100 subscribers. I'd really appreciate making that before the end of the year. I mean, I've got 2 months. Hopefully at least 2 more people tack on and enjoy the stories with us and the whatever Wednesdays and get on Friday. And so, thanks again. And I hope I see you guys in the next video. Bye bye for now.